Good morning, everyone. It's a Friday morning, and the severe weather threats are reducing over the weekend. There are still some spots that need to be watched today on the visible satellite loop. You can see there is a real trend for stability here in the plains with the skies finally clearing out. We may actually here in the Ozarks get a day without rain, or maybe several. No, probably not. It'll probably rain tomorrow night. But anyway, it's at least a little bit more stable. The East Coast is where all the action will be here today. There might be a little bit of a resurgence in the plains here, but we'll show you all those outlooks here in a minute. Let's take a look at the morning radar superimposed with the morning SPC Outlook, which has a slight risk of severe storms in places like Atlanta and Charlotte. And also Raleigh, and I'll be up almost to Washington, D.C. Norfolk is in there, so is Richmond, but you can see active thunderstorms here this morning approaching Houston and the coastal areas of Texas. So the whole idea here is there's a big frontal boundary right here that eventually will translate this way today, and we will get the jet stream kicked in to get that level 2 out of 5 threat going. If you watch the HRRR simulated radar, it does show the morning activity in Texas. That actually fades a little. Then we get a squall line or two set up through the Carolinas into Virginia, and that's going to be the focus of that severe weather threat for today, which we can take a look at in detail here for Friday. Level 1 and 2 chance out ahead of that weather system. It's covered up a little bit, but there is just a marginal risk out through parts of eastern New Mexico, and also in eastern Wisconsin and the Chicagoland area. There might be a couple of thunderstorms pop up on the back end of that rotating low. The tornado threat, though, is really confined to areas out east where they do have a 5% tornado risk issued for Richmond and Greensboro, North Carolina, almost to Charlotte, with a pretty broad brush 2% risk out ahead of that weather system. The Nadocast model here this morning does show that preference for Central Virginia, portions of North Carolina, putting that at a 5% risk for today. Again, 5% chance of a tornado within 25 miles of any point, which is the same criteria that the Storm Prediction Center uses. And then on Friday, again, we have the SIPS model. This is run out of St. Louis University, showing that there's about a 15% chance of all hazards of severe weather right in that same area. Little blip there around Denver. And then as we use the CSU probabilities, they agree with the tornado assessment for the most part, only they shift it a little bit more back and not as extensive, with a wind threat with those squall lines showing up a little bit in the Carolinas and down into South Georgia. So if you go into the weekend now, Saturday, this is what I was saying earlier, there's a resurgence of a little bit of return of moisture and instability. So there's a level 1 out of 5 chance from, let's say, West Texas up through central and western Oklahoma, right up to Wichita. And so I don't think there's much of a tornado threat with that, but there might be some large hail, a few damaging wind gusts with that on Saturday. And that's the stuff I was saying. If there's any left over from that, it would creep into southwest Missouri later on that night. CSU's probability there for tornadoes, none. That's good. And then for hail, again, the epicenter is right in the center of that SPC forecast, and there's a little bit of a wind risk with that. So hailers are usually north of a warm front, and that's exactly what's happening here on that outlook. And on Sunday, they're a little bit around Texas, Houston area, and perhaps Waco, and then maybe in portions of Montana and around Yellowstone National Park, a little bit of a threat, but generally a diminishing severe weather threat, at least for one day. The CSU model, again, puts a 0 tornado risk, a little bit of hail, a little bit of wind in that same area that the SPC outlines. Then the jet stream gets a little more vigorous in the northern plains on Monday. This forecast is virtually unchanged, really. So Pierre, South Dakota, Fargo, into parts of Minnesota, even the Nebraska Panhandle has a 15% risk of any severe weather within 25 miles. If you take a look at CSU's assessment of that, there's the SPC forecast. Theirs, which pretty much mirrors that, but it also extends that risk all the way down into the Texas Panhandle, which I would latch onto that risk, but I did see a short wave right here in the model data that would support that, and I think I have an image of that coming up. Anyway, on Tuesday, this is just a little bit bigger than yesterday's forecast, but from Lincoln right down to central and eastern Kansas through Oklahoma City and Tulsa and ending up just to the northwest of Dallas, there is a 15% risk of severe weather there. Again, nice thing to do is compare that outlook on the right with what the CSU probabilities are looking like, the machine learning model, and it pretty much agrees, except it brings it maybe a little bit more into parts of Missouri later on that night. Otherwise, that is a virtually identical forecast. Then on Wednesday, now this is an interesting day. I think there's a lot more potential on Wednesday than what's indicated here. I'm just using the CSU output, a broad brush from Detroit down to southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and back into the high plains, including West Texas and the Panhandle regions. So I think that's a rather interesting outlook. On Thursday, if you look at that, it almost looks like I made a mistake, but I didn't, and it's just almost the same. It's just a little bit different. It expands a little bit. So I do think that time period of Wednesday and Thursday probably has room to expand. If you take a look at the supercell composite for that same period we just talked about, 7 days ending June 5th, you do see a little higher probability out there through that period. And I think that, again, the back end of that severe weather threat on Wednesday and Thursday probably will focus on more of the high plains. And then if we go ahead to the 13th, did I skip a frame here? Wait a minute, I did. Okay, that is the 6th through the 12th. Again, an expansion. You can kind of see where the fronts end up, the drier, more stable area behind here. Florida pretty quiet, but the supercell index kind of ramps up June 6th through the 12th. And then if we go through June 13th through the 19th, it shifts north and is really pretty high. So let's take a look at some individual 500 millibar flows. This is Monday's. And it does show on Monday that is actually, is that Monday? I think I may have gotten the graphs mixed up here. Anyway, let's ignore Monday, but I think Tuesday's is correct. This is the outlook for Tuesday right here, roughly. So that makes a whole lot of sense. And then if we go to this should be titled Wednesday, there's a little trough right out here that I think will amplify severe weather out through the high plains on that day, and even into Thursday. I think that might be true. That's what I was saying earlier. Sorry about that. Anyway, June 2nd through the 8th, this is the EPS weeklies is what they're called. They run this on Thursday yesterday, and it just kind of broadly tells you where troughing and ridging is occurring. So if you see the blue colors, it's a slightly abnormal pattern, anomaly, meaning that there are lower, the black lines here dip further to the south than what is normally seen according to climate, and then these lines out in the northeast are rising a little bit more than what you normally see. So when you see troughiness in the west, it tends to encourage severe weather roughly along this point. But I will point out, though, that the dew points, the same period, are only abnormally high here, so that's richer moisture. Now, it doesn't mean that this is an unstable air, because this time of year, even a normal or slightly close to normal dew point is probably sufficient to get severe weather going. So that's a look at the severe weather. Sorry for the mess up of the labels there, but you get the idea. It quiets down over the weekend, except on the East Coast, and then it ramps back up again in the high plains, central plains, and eventually later on next week in the southern plains around Texas and Oklahoma. We'll keep an eye on it, as always. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day one because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.